Thank you for your patience. It is a pleasure and an honor to be with you this morning. Greetings from my home church, Irvine United Congregational Church, where Sarah Halverson Cano doesn't need me, but she likes me to pray sometimes. I've been a member there since 1996, and this was my second career, so I was ordained there in 2004. And I've served churches around Southern California as a transitional minister. People think it's odd for a scientist to go into ministry, but it's not actually that uncommon. We sit around puzzling about the meaning of things and how things work, whether they be atoms or spirits. So here I am. But my ministry took a turn in 2018 when I read an article by a sustainability professional named Jem Bendell. He's the guy, I believe, who created those little fish charts that you get at the Monterey Bay Aquarium and some places that tell you which fish is sustainably caught and so forth. Well, after 20 years in the sustainability field, he came to the realization that nothing we're doing in this modern industrial consumer society is sustainable. It's just a question of when exactly things will unravel. I kind of knew that before I read the article, but I thought it would be 100 years from now or something. He believes it will be much sooner, and he made a good case. So, since 2018, all the alarming things related to weather, environment, species extinction are happening faster than expected, glacial melting, you name it. And that's bad news. And you came here for good news, so please hang on, we'll get there. But I asked myself as a spiritual leader, what can I do? And after a season of prayer and discernment, I began hosting climate grief workshops. I asked my climate activist friends in Orange County, and Irvine UCC is an activist church, so I'm in the network. Do you need to grieve the state of the world? I asked them. And to a person they said, oh yeah. So we did that together. We had a half-day workshop at Irvine UCC. I called it Grief, Gratitude, and Courage. It felt good. We did it in February of 2020, and then a thing happened called COVID. Everybody was stuck in their houses, and I finally got the nerve to learn how to use Zoom. We had no choice in those days, right? To offer my grief workshops. And when I went looking, what I found was an international organization called the Deep Adaptation Forum, where I work today. This is an online group for people trying to figure out how to cope and how to be of loving service in the face of climate and social breakdown that they believe is going to happen. And they are all around the world. So I've been with them for 4 years. And I wrote this book about my experience so that what I call my climate chaplaincy can be available to more people. The book is called Eye of the Storm, Facing Climate and Social Chaos with Calm and Courage. On the back cover it says, when things fall apart, you don't have to. And that applies to more than just the weather. And it's the topic of this sermon. So the book has a lot of tools for people to face hard times, to be resilient emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. It's not overtly Christian. Most of the people I work with seem to be Buddhist, actually. It's available free online on PDF form and as an audiobook. In addition, you can buy it at your usual places, and including in an hour in your fellowship hall. You can also talk to me more if you're interested. And this morning, I'd like to lift up 3 tools from the book. The first tool is kind of an odd one, you might think, befriending your grief. Because when you realize how bad things are, and they didn't used to be, grief is a normal and healthy reaction to that realization. So don't be scared of grief or ashamed of it. Grief is different from despair. We grieve because we love and we face loss. Expressing grief over the state of the world can be appropriate and healthy. So honor your grief and don't carry it alone. The second tool I'll tell you about this morning is finding stories that work, life-giving stories. The third tool is cultivating relationships, all kinds of relationships, including with non-humans. We need all those relationships to survive and thrive. So, first, befriending grief. In the Deep Adaptation Forum, I host a bunch of Zoom groups each month where we show up for each other. Discouraged climate activists, grieving nature's lovers whose special place has disappeared, burnt, or bulldozed. Young people who despair over their future and the planet's. And sustainability professionals who've realized their job is window dressing. When people are anxious or despairing about things falling apart, I seek to be the eye of the storm for them. I make a calm space where they can catch their breath, get reoriented, and explore how to live and how to be of service when the world they hope for is not happening. I don't try to fix anything. I don't give them easy answers. I don't tell them it's not that bad. Instead, I'm a compassionate witness. I listen, and I trust that they can face what's happening without falling apart, and they feel that trust. I understand that this is a job that not everyone would want to do. I'm kind of weird that way. I've enjoyed working in hospice, too, because I know from experience that just bearing witness to somebody's loss or struggle often does a lot for them to relieve their anxiety and to inspire their courage. Just showing up, bearing witness, listening. A lot of the suffering that people feel when things are falling apart, whatever the thing, comes from not being able to talk honestly about the loss they're feeling. They don't want to bring other people down, so they hold their pain in private. And often, people don't understand, or they dismiss, or they cheer up. You know, when you're in grief, cheer up is not the thing you need to hear. What's worse, in our culture, things just aren't supposed to fall apart. You know, they're just supposed to keep getting bigger and better and compound interest and more stuff, and it's supposed to make you happy and successful. And if that's not happening, people get labeled failures. But that's not gospel, folks. But when that's the conditions of the culture, grief and pain get silenced. They get stuffed down. They don't go away. They just pop up as depression and despair. I can't tell you the number of people who've come to a gathering I'm hosting online who've expressed relief. They can say what's on their heart without being dismissed or told to get over it, or they're being too negative. Grief is a process, not just an emotion. And do believe me when I say that grief is not a black hole that will swallow you. Grieving is how we metabolize a loss of something we love and adjust to a new reality without that thing. Sharing grief makes it less heavy to hold. And that's why I invite you to befriend your grief. Share your grief. And now comes the audience participation part of the sermon. What do you grieve about the state of our world today? And please note, it doesn't have to be the same thing for everyone. Around politics, we may see things very differently. And as long as you don't criticize the people who see it differently, you're allowed to grieve what you grieve. I will repeat what you say so they can hear it online. What do you grieve in our world today? Not used to audience participation, are you? The state of the climate, yeah. And it's not getting better. You know, they talk about little things, but when you add the whole planet together, it's not getting better. Sorry, I heard two things. Hang on. Division in our country, political and social division. Yeah. Yeah, the loss of a spiritual and moral center. I'm going to say that because I'm okay with my Buddhist friends who say that they don't believe in God. Yeah. Yeah, democracy appears to be crumbling. Yeah, that's a big one. Oh yeah, grieve that what seem to be the endless shootings that happen, including the one yesterday. Okay, that's enough. Thank you. I know you have more, but we need to take it in doses that we can tolerate. Now, I want to say that my view of grief is biblical because I read in the prophets and the Psalms a lot of grieving people. Or maybe it was all David, but I don't think so. In today's scripture, we hear Jesus declaring that those who mourn and struggle in other ways are blessed. Whatever else that famous passage, the Beatitudes, means, we can know two things because of it. Jesus expects that we will grieve sometimes. And instead of judging us for not being happy or successful or not having enough faith, God somehow blesses us in our suffering. We're not alone. God is with us through it all, loving and sustaining us. But that is hard for a person to believe unless a human is willing to be with them in their grief too. So, for me, being the eye of the storm, that calm and loving presence in hard times, that's holy work. And it can be challenged. That's why I wrote a book about how to resource yourself for doing that. So when you face loss and disruption, if you have tools to take care of yourself, then you will be able to be of service to somebody else. Or you could just keep your own boat afloat. That's not a bad thing either. So honor your grief, befriend your grief. Now let's talk about the second tool for being the eye of the storm. Finding stories that work. I mean by stories, those cultural and personal lenses that define our reality, how the world works, how we should live, what we should value. I hope our lens has a good gospel component in it, but I don't see much gospel component in the culture at large, in the news. When we're in despair or confusion at the state of the world, or about our own identity and purpose, that means that those shaping stories, those perspectives, are failing us. And then it's time to do the very hard work of letting go of old stories and finding new stories that work. And not all these stories have to have happy endings. Well, we have an ultimate happy ending in our faith. But on earth, not all these stories have to have happy endings, but they can have courageous endings. They can have meaningful endings. And in that way, they can be life-giving. When I was writing the book, I started questioning a lot of old stories and trying out new stories that made me feel kind of radical, actually. One new story that's working out well for me is this. Despite what our culture says about everything getting bigger and better all the time, things do fall apart. It is in the natural order of things to be born, to grow, to flourish, to fade, and to die. So I don't have to panic. When a beloved organization that I've staked a lot of my identity in appears to be dwindling, they're not doing their work. The volunteers aren't showing up. There's not enough money. I don't have to blame anybody. I don't have to panic. I don't have to rush around trying to fix everything. But I do have to grieve that that beloved organization can't do the thing it was created to do, at least not like it used to. People fall apart too. My mother broke her pelvis about 2 years ago, and I thought it might be the end, and I was starting to panic, and then I reminded myself, all people come to an end. All I can do is show up and love, not fix her, not try to make her do things she's unwilling to do. Believe me, I thought about it. It turned out that she did recover. It was actually amazing, miraculous perhaps. But not everyone will, not every time. There's another life-giving story that I love to tell. Everything is connected to everything else. And because we forgot that, that's how we got in the ecological mess that we're in today. Because we thought the earth was a big box store that we could just go raid for bargains. And a garbage dump that we could just toss our stuff away. Well, guess what? The planet got smaller. There is no away. There is a mountain just to the east of us that's made of Irvine garbage. I do know that. But everything is sacred. Every human is sacred. And the non-human world is sacred too and deserves our respect and care. That doesn't fix the ecological crisis, but it's how I want to live from here on out. Even if I'm kind of a hypocrite, because, you know, you have high ideals, you're going to be a hypocrite. It's expected. In this miraculous web of life, we are never alone. I knew that spiritually, but now I understand it physically too. We are upheld by the web of life continuously. As plants give us oxygen to breathe, we are upheld. As we eat every meal, we are upheld. We are never alone. And this brings us to the third tool for being the eye of the storm, cultivating relationships. All kinds of relationships with kindred souls and with people who push our buttons. Church is a great place to do both of those things, so thank you for being here. And thanks to all of you who work behind the scenes to make church happen. I see you, and what you do matters. We cultivate our relationship with the sacred. That's so important. Do it your way. But however you do it, make the power and presence and love of God real in your life, not just an abstraction. Root yourself deeply in the sacred, in whatever way works for you, so that you have deep roots when the storm hits. And finally, we can cultivate relationships with the non-human world. And that's not something most Christians have paid attention to, and I didn't used to either. But so many of the people that I've been meeting online have close and personal relationships with their gardens, some special tree, a mountain, a river. One person specializes in relationships with rocks. Two-way relationships. They speak and they listen. Now, as a scientist, I was told that's not possible. But as a person of faith, I know that whether it's We don't have to know where the line is between our imagination and that which is unseen or doesn't have a mouth to speak beyond us. So, it helps to have conversations with things in the non-human world as if they're persons. Now that makes me sound really nutty, but I've stopped feeling embarrassed about it. I talk to my garden as if it's a person, and I hear things back, whether it's my imagination or God or the actual garden, I don't care. I get wisdom from my garden. And I notice that that way of being is true for almost every traditional culture, indigenous culture that is intact. They address non-humans as persons. They attend to them, respect to them, ask their permission to mess with them, give them thanks, apologize. And if we did that, we wouldn't be in the ecological mess that we're in. So I'm doing it best I know how. It's not going to fix anything. It just feels like the right thing to do. So on Friday mornings, I'm not leading the group. I'm one of the participants. The leader is Emma Mary Gathergood, who comes from the middle of England, and that's really her name, Emma Mary Gathergood. And she hosts Earth Listening. She's a retired therapist, so she has a file full of ideas about what we could ask the Earth advice for. She's also an activist. And she gives us a little pep talk, a little orientation, and then she sends us out for 5 minutes of meditation in the place that feels special to us, whether it's real or imagined. I always go out in the backyard to my native plant garden. And reliably, in that time, we hear wisdom. We come back and share it with each other and learn so much. And little miracles do seem to happen, when you're paying attention. Emma Mary likes to say, we know we love the earth, but remember, earth loves you too and wants to help you. And Emma Mary's Earth Listening feeds my soul. Now, the charge in this sermon, as they say, I would like to invite you to practice being the eye of the storm, because anxiety is contagious and there's a lot of it going around right now. We need calm to be able to stay our best selves. And calm is contagious too. And we need courage to face the hard times ahead. And courage is contagious. So I invite you to befriend your grief, to be a compassionate witness to others' grief. I invite you to let go of stories that have failed us and our planet, and tell stories that work, life-giving stories. And I invite you to cultivate all kinds of relationships with people across the political aisle from you, and even with non-humans. For me, cultivating relationships with the non-human world feels like belonging. It feels like coming home. Even if home is in rough shape, our earth is a beautiful, miraculous, amazing home. As earth loves us and provides for us, may we learn to love and care for her in return. Amen.